First, I would like to introduce you, Heidi. You are foremost a painter, and your work deal with two central themes, am I allowed to say? One is the representation and the presentation of the feminine, the female body within painting, and the second is paint as a medium, as a means itself. You were born in 1982, am I allowed to say?
Yes, sure.
In Los Angeles, California, and you live and work in Brooklyn, New York, and in Düsseldorf at the moment.
Yeah.
Heidi came in advance of this show to Düsseldorf. The paintings were made here, which I think is a very interesting aspect. You have an MFA from Yale University and a Bachelor in Fine Arts from Cooper Union, and are professor for painting at Alfred University in New York. Your work is in major collections such as the Moderna Museet in Stockholm, the Kadist Foundation in Paris, or also at the Philara down the street. And your work have been reviewed various times in major publishing houses such as the New York Times or Art in America. This is your second exhibition at Karel Wilborn, and it has the title Kink Odelisk. But Odelisk, I don't know if everybody's familiar with the term. Odelisk is like there are very prominent paintings like Un Grès Grand Odelisk in the Louvre, which show reclining women, harems, concubines that in terms of the 19th century Orientalism have been painted a lot in art history, but you give it a kink. And kink means a deviant sexual practice, a fetish, something that goes against the, let's say, normal.
Yeah.
So this already is like jumping totally into the questions of representation and presentation. And maybe you want to tell us more about the title and what your thoughts about that.
Yeah, also over like ownership, you know, when you think of this idea of kink and you think of it in this American vernacular of it being kind of this commercialized aesthetic, you know, for me I think of kink as something that's almost wearable. It's almost something that is so recognizable as this fetish kind of wear and objecthood. So when I start a series of work, a body of work, I don't want to start by being too specific with it. I kind of want the paint to be applied this way to the surface, or I want to use this color. How do I use this color with this one to form something that maybe is an interesting relationship? So basically, I'm starting out with very formal ideas of what the work should be and where kind of the ambition wants to go with it. And so, you know, it has to become something in order for me to name it. And so when it gets to the halfway point, then I start thinking of a title. This title has to be the umbrella of the whole body of work. And so again, once I had this language to apply to this body of work, I started to make the paintings themselves adhere to this idea of what, you know, the kink and the odelisk were doing for the language of the work, but I wanted the formalism to kind of, I don't know, hit up against those terms as well.
We're in front of your odelisk, and it's not nude, it's not presenting itself. It's doing actually the opposite, even though the body is like taking over the entire screen.
It's activated, and it's an activated image, whereas, you know, with this kind of the objecthood of the odelisk or something, it's a very benign, non-active participation that the woman is subjected to in these historical paintings, you know, or they're a vehicle for something else, or they're casting around to be desired. And, you know, obviously the people or the figures in my paintings, they're not waiting for that same, they're activated in a different way for themselves through the paint and not just the viewer.
You work parallel the series of works.
Yeah.
And in several layers, your images actually, the images on the painting, they find their form very progressively.
It's like they're kind of fighting for their form. So I work on the whole series was up against the walls of the studio, so I can see all of them all at once. So I kind of know what each painting is trying to do in relation to the one next to it, or the one across from it. Trying to find the form is the hardest part of my practice, where I don't make drawings beforehand. The image is always fighting for itself in the work.
Femininity in a female body today is also always in progress. It's a political battleground. The bodies we see here, that they lack sexual attributes. The body, like it almost gets lost in, I don't mean to lose it, but it goes into total abstraction almost.
There's a lot of this inherent history that has to get built up, broken down, a lot of failure of trying to articulate what exactly this figure is trying to do. And sometimes I think the moments that I really fail is when I try to articulate the body. And I try to think, this is a body, and how is a female body represented? That kind of pressure, or that kind of question that I ask the canvas, derails everything, derails what I'm trying to do as a painter. So it's constantly a fight of like my philosophy of like trying to deal with feminism or trying to deal with the feminine and trying to deal with the paint. So they kind of like separate at a certain point, or maybe they separate at the very beginning. And then I have to push so they can converge into a whole idealistic one. The content has to go hand in hand with the materiality. Trying to represent this feminine form, or trying to think about what the body is such a major question, and is such a hard thing to even conceive with the paint. So a lot of this work that you see, it's just me fighting for an explanation of what this body is trying to do in a painting. This is the questions that are in my work, and this is what I'm dealing with, the trajectory of painting and representation of the feminine and how that has been executed. I always think of like this idea of the body or doing the figure as just as a means to a vehicle for the paints, and to explore myself as a painter, and to think about how the paint can lend itself to some kind of narrative. How can the paint take over as the character of the painting, and then maybe what it leaves behind is the residue of a character or a figure or an atmosphere.
You are a female person and an art historical, so you have this knowledge, but that's really interesting how you go against it and at the same time you inherit it. You once put up the term narrative formalism.
Yeah, I think it's inherent to the work. The formalism that's embedded with the work, that pushes the work forward, again, it activates the content. It activates like the figure. That to me is like the paint is pushing this agenda. The agenda is speaking about a certain kind of femininity, or a change of femininity, or some kind of statement. And I think that's what it is, narrative formalism.
And when do you find the point when the painting is finished? Because I know you sometimes rework the painting entirely.
The paintings are done for me when they stop asking me for things. So I go through the paintings themselves and I diagram them, and I think, is this articulated enough? Is this activated or deactivated in a way that's giving enough or taking away enough?